Hey everybody, I'd like to read a passage of scripture in your hearing from the book of Proverbs chapter 23 verse 7, and I'll be reading from the New King James Version of the Bible, and it reads as follows. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Now, whenever we hear this passage of scripture read or even quoted, we often assume that it's promising that we'll become what we think. In other words, if I think I'm prosperous, I'll become prosperous. If I think I'm healed, I'll be healed. For after all, the passage does say, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. But I hate to disappoint you. That particular interpretation applied to this verse would actually be inaccurate. And this is why reading a passage in its context is extremely important in order to obtain the correct meaning of a text. As a matter of fact, the part of the passage you heard me read isn't even the whole verse. Yet that's the part of the verse we often hear read or quoted. Now, the question you need to ask yourself when reading this verse is, who is the he being referred to here in the text? For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. And what exactly is he thinking? Now, in order to discover that information, it requires you reading the verse prior to this one. It also requires you reading the entirety of this verse, along with the verse that follows. So when we read verse 6 and the entirety of verse 7, including verse 8, we'll have a greater insight as to what the passage actually means. Now, first, let me provide you a quick background relating to the passage. Chapters 22 through 24 of the book of Proverbs contain that which is referred to as the 30 sayings of the wise. Now, these sayings serve for the purpose of providing sound, practical instructions for living. As a matter of fact, verses 6 through 8 of Proverbs 23 are the seventh of these 30 sayings of the wise. And this particular saying here in verses 6 through 8 provides instructions to the one who finds him or herself in a position of being an uninvited guest to the home of a begrudging host. Now listen to what the passage says, and we'll begin with verse 6. Verse 6 says, do not eat the bread of a miser. That word miser in the Hebrew simply means one who is stingy. As a matter of fact, there's a translation, the New International Version, who reads it like this. It says, do not eat the food of a begrudging host. One who is begrudging is one who is reluctant to give, one who is stingy, in other words. It goes on in verse 6 and it says, nor desire his delicacies. Now, the word delicacies in the Hebrew, it means tasty, savory, or delicious. So basically, verse 6 is informing us that if we happen to be an uninvited guest at the home of one who is stingy, then we are not to eat their food, no matter how tasty, delicious, or savory the food may appear. Look at verse 7. It says, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Now, the he being referred to here is the stingy man, the begrudging host. But the question is, what is this begrudging host thinking? Let's read on and find out. It says, eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. Now, the word heart here means inner self, the inner self. In other words, while you, the uninvited guest, are eating the stingy man's food, he may be smiling externally, attempting to hide how he really feels, but inwardly, he's actually counting the cost of the food you're consuming. He's welcomed you with his mouth, but he's cursing you with his thoughts. He's extended the invitation for you to eat because he doesn't want to appear to be stingy, but his heart or inner self doesn't mean a word he said. Now let's look at verse 8. The morsel you have eaten, you will vomit up. What does this mean? When it finally comes to your realization how the begrudging or stingy host really feels about you, instead of being nourished by the little food you've consumed, you actually become nauseated, not because the food was bad, but because you discovered the inward attitude of the host. Let's conclude with what verse 8 says. It says, the morsel you have eaten, you will vomit up and waste your pleasant words. What are these pleasant words? These pleasant words are compliments. Compliments that you have given to the host for being generous. But yet, in discovering that he really wasn't generous, you wasted all of your compliments that you have extended towards him, because he wasn't being generous at all. He was actually pretending to hide the fact that he felt forced to accommodate you. So in all actuality, we discover that this passage of scripture has absolutely nothing to do with promising us that we'll become what we think. I want to encourage you to read every text in context, and also like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I look forward to sharing with you again next Thursday. God bless you. We'll talk to you soon.